G'day and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk to my UK friends, my friends in England, Scotland, Wales, and parts of Ireland, I believe, in the UK. I don't know. I don't know about these things. But anyway, I want to talk to you because your rules are changing as of the end of the month. The beginning of next year, there are some quite sweeping changes coming in, and most of them are not that good, to be totally honest. One thing I should say, as everyone knows, you've watched this channel regularly, I have Parkinson's, and one of the little recognized aspects of Parkinson's is that it messes with your brain. It's dopamine. It goes up and down. Dopamine is the feel-good chemical, apparently, which makes you feel good, and you don't get enough of it with Parkinson's. So one of the effects, you get tremors and things, but one of the more crippling effects is the way it affects your mood, and you can get apathy and depression. Now, I've worked very hard to avoid depression because that is a really crippling affliction that can knock you right out of the game. So I work very hard to make sure I don't get depressed, but I'm having a lot of trouble at the moment because the way rules are going around the world, it would be very easy to get depressed because the future of this hobby is really in jeopardy. It's basically being marginalized by massively overreaching regulation, and that's what I want to talk about today for you people in the UK. Now, first of all, the rules change, as I say, on the the end of this month, 1st of January. New rules come in. Basically, what the UK has done is they've looked at the EU and they've just basically stolen their rules because with Brexit, and they're not a part of that, or they won't be part of the EU, but they've just stolen most of the rules anyway, so no copyright violations there. But let's have a look at what's going on there. Well, things are getting really interesting because let's take, for example, sub 250. Now, to date in the UK, you haven't had to register if you're flying a sub 250 drone or model aircraft, and that makes sense. And look at Transport Canada. They said if it's under 250 grams, it is so safe, we're not even going to make any prescriptive regulation. Just don't endanger people, property or aviation, and you're good to go. And that's worked extremely well. In fact, it's been reviewed in Canada and they decided to keep that because it was working so damn well. In the UK, the rules still apply to sub 250, but to date, if you had something like this, you know, sub 250 gram craft, you didn't have to register to fly this. And kids could fly it, all great, fantastic. And as of the 1st of January, you still won't have to register this if it's sub 250 grams. Woohoo! Unless, and this is where it gets tricky, unless you put a camera on it and fly FPV, or you have a camera on it, then you have to register. How the hell does that work? I don't know how that works. But the EU rules have a very interesting clause. They say, if you have a sub 250 gram craft, it doesn't need to be registered unless it has a sensor able to capture personal data. And apparently, if you look at the documents that the UK CAA dropped, that includes a camera. Well, that is a camera. They say quite clearly, you know, camera must be registered. But according to CAP 722, which is the regulations that control model aircraft, it says here in this section, which I'll quote, it's actually page 31, section 1.3. And it says, if you have a camera that is used solely for the purpose of controlling or monitoring the aircraft, that doesn't count as a personal capture device. So hang on a minute. If you're flying FPV and you only have a camera that's there solely to pilot the aircraft, that means it's not a recording camera and you're not recording it in your goggles, then you shouldn't have to register because it doesn't meet the criteria as specified in CAP 722. Now, I don't know, is CAP 722 being superseded by these new rules? I haven't worked that out, but unless it is being superseded, then I don't understand what's going on here. Is a camera require registration or doesn't it require registration? If it's a recording camera, if it's a GoPro or whatever, you can't put a GoPro on a sub 250 very easily, but if it's a you know, a small lightweight recording camera, then yes, you would need to register. But if it's just an SD camera or an FPV camera that goes straight back to your goggles, no recording, then according to CAP 722 at the moment, you shouldn't have to register it because that's specifically excluded from the regulations, from the need to register. So there's a lot of confusion. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just old and easily confused and befuddled. That's quite possible, but it seems a very grey area to me. And I'd say to people in the EU who are going to be hit with the same kind of regulation, if your drone has a camera on it, it needs to be registered. I'd say no. Look, even the UK, the CAP 722, they've openly acknowledged that no, FPV cameras without recording are exempted. They don't qualify as a device capable of capturing personal data because they don't. If you think about it, an FPV camera is like a mirror. Now, if you hold a mirror up, you can see around corners, right? You're not capturing anything. What's happening is the image is being reflected off the mirror back to your eyes. FPV is the same. You have a camera that basically enables an image to be seen through your goggles. It's just reflecting that image effectively through fancy electronics into your eyes in a way that you couldn't do otherwise. So it is not capturing a damn thing. Nothing's being stored, nothing's being saved. It shouldn't need registration. But in the EU, they seem to think a camera requires registration as well. And CAA just can't make up its mind. The CAP 722 says you don't need it, but the guidance information that they've dropped says you do need it. If they don't know what the story is, how are you supposed to know? And that's the whole thing about the UK regulations. They are so incredibly complicated. You've got all these different categories of craft, and you've got all these different categories of operation, and then there's a matrix of this, that, and the other. It is so damn complicated. I don't know how anyone can work out what they're doing. And here's another example. FPV. Now, as I read the regulations, there is no allowance for FPV. FPV, or should I say, in the open category. Now, one of the categories of the type of flying you do is called open, which is designed to handle legacy craft, the existing models you've got. You fly them away from people, away from property and so forth, and you can fly them in the open category because they don't have a CE mark or anything like that. They're not categorized, so they're open. But there's no mention of FPV in the open category. It says you must always have visual line of sight of the craft, which prohibits FPV because you put goggles on, you no longer have visual line of sight of the craft. Now, some of the model flying organisations in the UK have got a exemption for this, a special allowance, because it specifically says that they can fly with FPV as long as they have a spotter. They have negotiated that with CAA. And that's fine if you're a member of the BMFA, the Large Model Association, FPV UK, whatever. That's fine. You'll be able to fly FPV. But what if you're a lone flyer? What if you're someone who just wants to do a bit of freestyle in the local park, or that you don't want to join a club, or there's no clubs near you? Well, as I read it, you are not allowed to fly FPV. Even if you had a spotter, you're not allowed to fly FPV because it's not allowed under the open category. You'd have to go under, what's the category they say here? Specific. You have to go under specific category, and that's a whole lot more work. That's not the same. So, yeah, what they've done is basically say, if you want to fly FPV, you've got to belong to one of these organisations. Now, I believe that model flying bodies, national model flying bodies, are a great idea. And interest-specific bodies like FPV UK, brilliant idea. I would recommend people join these because they provide you with a lot of information. They provide you with some training, effectively some certification with their little tests. There are very few downsides to belonging to these organisations. They work very hard to protect the rights of their members in the UK, but what we're doing is we're marginalising people who don't want to or for whatever reason are unable to join a club like that. They're saying, no, if you're not part of the club scene, you're out. There's no room for lone FPV flyers in the UK. You're gone. You're gone ski. That's it. You can't fly FPV unless you're a member of one of these organisations. And that kind of sucks, really, because this hobby has been built on people who have done things on it. When I started in this hobby, I was 8 years older perhaps. I built planes on my own. I didn't know anyone else that was interested in building model planes. I built planes on my own. I went out and I flew them. I was young. I did it on my own. I didn't belong to any clubs or anything. There were no clubs in my area. So under these current regulations, it's saying you people don't count. You're not important. We're not going to allow for you. You're not allowed to fly FPV. So that's a shame because the modern FPV flyer, more often than not, is not a club member. If you look at YouTube, so many people fly. They fly freestyle in parks and in deserted areas and things. And very few of them are members of clubs because they don't need to be. The clubs don't offer them anything really. Because they're not flying at a grassy field in the middle of nowhere. Now, special interest groups like the FPV UK, they may have some other things to offer. They're not so much about flying fields, they're about providing the certification. But it's really annoying that you've got to now become a member of an organisation to fly. That's a restriction I don't think should be enforced, but it is in the UK and it's going to be in the US as well. I'll talk about that in another video. You're going to have to belong to the AMA or some other body, some other community-based organisation if you want to fly your legacy model or your other models that don't have remote ID. As I say, the hobby is changing forever, and I'm not happy with many of these changes. And to show just how stupid things are in the UK, it's not just radio controlled models and drones that are being affected, it's control line as well. Control line and tethered flight is also covered by these rules. You will need to register if you fly control line models that way more than, and you're not part of a club. Again, if you're flying under the banner of a model flying body, you won't have to register. But if you're flying control line outside of that, you're going to have to register to fly control line. Seriously, what is the point? What is the point? It's not like you're going to be flying miles away and, you know, if you're flying control line, the PC pod can wait till you landed and go over and talk to you. Why do you need to register? And no, it's just crazy. Control line, seriously? And tethered around the pole, unbelievable. I do not understand why they're doing it. Well, I do understand, but it just makes no sense. It is overreaching, overbearing regulation for no actual real purpose. And you might ask, what is the point of all these new regulations anyway? So people aren't dying, planes aren't falling from the sky, massive property damage isn't occurring. So why are things being regulated more and more and more? Well, it's very interesting because one of the documents that the CAA dropped says basically that these new regulations have been created for the purpose of producing crimes. They're creating new crimes related to drone use. So what? They want to create crimes? It's like, and the things you do now, the things that I did as a child in the UK will be crimes. Under the new regulations, you cannot fly unsupervised unless you are at least 12 years old as of the 1st of January. Now this is again, I don't understand it. It says that the lower age limit will be 12 years, but this will go back, this limit will be removed. Well, hang on a minute. Is it important to limit the use of these things by young children, or is it not? Because if you're saying today they must, or on the 1st of January, they must be at least 12 years old, but in the future, they don't have to be 12 years old, what is the point? Is that age important or not? One minute you're saying it is important, then you're saying, but we're going to phase it out because it's not important. No, there's no consistency, there's no sense, there's no logic to some of these regulations. They are absolutely and ridiculously stupid. And in the UK, of course, remember, you've got to be 18 to be an operator. That means the owner of a craft. You can't own a model aircraft or a drone unless you're 18. How does that work? When I built my first model and owned it when I was about 7 years old, but that would be a criminal offence under the new UK regulations. A criminal offence to build your own model because you must have an operator ID and you can't get one of those unless you're 18 years old. Why are we criminalising children? Why are we criminalising the fun, safe things that we did as children? Why are they now a criminal offence for kids today? Show me the bodies that have produced, that have mandated we make these massive changes. There are no bodies. There are no bodies. This is just crazy. This is lunatic. This is massive regulatory overreach. It is a removal of freedoms that are not causing any risk to anybody. Let's go back to that camera thing for a moment. Why is it that they're saying you can't have a camera on your drone or your model aircraft unless you register it, even if it's sub 250? Well, it's not about safety, is it? It can't be about safety. So it's about security and privacy. Well, first of all, I don't think that an airspace regulator should be making regulations to protect privacy. It's not their purview. Privacy there should be a separate organisation for that. Aviation regulators should be there solely to make sure that the airspace is safe, that people are not endangered by the use of flying craft. Privacy's got nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with aviation safety. So they're clouding the waters, they're muddying it. There's too much overlap here. And even if we were talking privacy or security, because maybe you'll use your drone to film a nuclear power station or something and it'll be sent back to China and all this sort of drivel. Well, hang on a minute. There is far more at risk from people with smartphones than people with drones. Now, there are stories in the media where people have been arrested and fined or imprisoned for using their smartphone to invade people's privacy by filming up women's skirts. Crazy people do that. I've never heard of anyone filming up a woman's skirt with a drone. But no, apparently phones, we don't have to have a registration number printed clearly on our phone or be able to allow police to tell who we are by interrogating our phone over the wireless spectrum. No, we can just use our phone with anonymity, basically, unless you're actually tracking the phone calls, which is pretty hard to do if you're just standing out there in public. You don't know who that person is just because they've got a phone with a 4K camera with digital zoom that can pull right in, whereas the video on your little sub 250 drone with its standard definition analog footage, you can't recognise anyone from more than 10 metres away, if that. But with your digital smartphone, you can get right up and pull people in from a long way away. So it's not really about security. It's not really about safety, is it? Because the other thing is I've got a camcorder. It's got a 24 times zoom. I can pull in on people from a long way away. They don't know I'm there. They don't know I'm there because I'm a long way away. I've got a long lens. And if you get something like the Nikon P1000, It's got such a big zoom that you can pull in from miles away. In fact, there's videos on YouTube where people are like 3 or 5 miles away from what they're filming, and then they can zoom right in. You can see the people. And those people have no clue that they're being videoed. That could be a nuclear power station. You could be looking right in from a elevated vantage point, looking right in at all the goings on inside. But if you're going to fly a drone, you have to be so close that people are going to see. They're going to know that what you're doing. You can't do that covertly, but you can use your smartphone. You can walk past like this, filming. People think you're talking, but you're actually filming. And you can use your camera with a long lens from so far away you can't be seen. But yet, you don't need to register either of those devices. You don't need to be tracked with either of those devices. So the whole thing about safety and security and privacy, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all about control. It's about control. It's about none of those other things. And I don't think that the state, the governments, the regulators have any right to be controlling things that are not a risk to safety, security, or privacy. I really don't. But they do. Now, the other worrying thing about the UK situation is that the government has rolled out some statutory fines, which means that basically PC Plod can walk up to you and issue you with a fine if you're in violation of the civil aviation regulations. That's it. They're going to be £200 to £2,500. They can just throw a fine at you. £2,500. There you go. Off you go. No judge, jury, or trial. That's it. Boom. It's handed out by the magistrates court. They just rubber stamp it. And if you want to contest that, you probably have to go to the Crown Court or a higher court to contest it at great expense and cost. So most of the time, you're just going to have to say, I'll pay it. And even if I was in the right, I'm just going to pay it because it's going to cost me 10 times that fine to actually prove my innocence. That's really sad that we're going to be giving kids fines for up to £2,500 for doing things that I and countless other people did as children quite safely and legally. That's suddenly now this big bad criminal offence. And even worse than that is that the fines can be issued by police or an authorised person. I think they use the phrase authorised person. Who the hell is an authorised person? Well, that's anybody that the CAA decides they want to be able to issue fines. It can be parking wardens. It can be community police officers. It can be anybody. It can be a volunteer. It can be the set up. Maybe there'll be a police a force of outraged citizens who hate drones, and they'll go to CAA and say, look, we want the right to issue fines, and CAA will say, right, away you go, and they'll issue fines. There's no checks and balances on this. So anybody who is authorised will be able to issue you with a fine. So yeah, oh man, and for what? For what? A fine for doing things that we as children did quite legally and safely, because now it's a criminal offence, not just a misdemeanor, but a criminal offence. It's terrible. So yeah, and this is why I have trouble not being depressed. I really do, because we are stealing the future from our children, our grandchildren, and their children. The things that we enjoy, there's my phone, ignore that. The things that we enjoyed when we were young, making model planes, going down to the schoolyard or the park and flying them, without risk of massive fines and a criminal record, gone. No longer allowed. Why? Why? And this is the question I ask the regulators. Show me the risk assessment. Show me the solid data that justifies these draconian changes, these massive removal of freedoms for no apparent reason. Show me the bodies. Show me the massive bills for damage to property. They can't, because there's no risk assessment. There are no bodies. There's no massive damage to property. So why are they doing it? Well, I think we all know that, or at least regular viewers of this channel know that. It's all about the money. Now, this 0 to 400 foot airspace, suddenly very, very valuable, very valuable. So we must look after the people with the large wallets who want that airspace. We must move the hobby out of the way to tiny grassy fields, or basically get rid of it altogether. We can't have children flying toys in parks if we're going to have deliveries, drones zooming overhead. No, it's not acceptable. Money comes before freedoms and rights every time in the modern world. It's very sad. It's very depressing. But I'm doing my best to stay not depressed, to stay on top of it all. But I'm really disappointed mostly in the hobby, in the people, and probably not you. If you're watching this, you're probably not one of the guilty parties, but there are a lot of guilty parties out there. The people who don't care about the hobby anymore. All they care about is themselves and their own enjoyment. When the government, the UK government and the US government, when they said, you're going to have to register yourself if you want to fly with your toys, I said to all these people, don't register, do not register. No, under no circumstances should you register. because it basically, you're going to throw away your freedoms. The things that are so important to the hobby, you're going to throw them away. And it's what's happened. It's what happened. If the model flying community had stood up and said, no, we refuse to register, then look at it this way. If one or two people don't comply with regulations, they've got a problem. They have a problem. But if everybody fails to comply with regulations, the regulator has a problem. And that's what should be the case. The regulator should be one with the problem, because they're making the overreaching control, the removal of freedoms. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. And the only people who can stop them are you, I, and all the other people who should not be complying with the regulations. And by doing that, I'm not saying that you need to break the rules, break the law, or put yourself at jeopardy. All you had to do in the UK was say, I'm not going to register. I'm just going to stick with sub 250 for the duration. And that would have basically derailed the whole registration thing. And you wouldn't have had to break the rules. You'd have still been insured, you're still covered by your club insurance, you still go out there, still have a lot of fun. And remember, in the UK, your flying season's probably only 6 months long. It's not exactly a tropical country. So for 6 months, all you had to do was either just not fly or fly sub 250. You wouldn't have risked getting prosecuted, but you would have sent a very clear message to the government saying, we are not going to comply with this demand for registration. But you didn't. So many people just signed up. Oh, it's only £9. Well, it's going to be £16.50, but it's only £9. We can afford that. Woohoo! And now look at it. Now look at it. Children are going to be turned into criminals because these new rule changes, that's what they're doing. Turning children into criminals if they want to have fun in the way that we did. Oh, I don't know that anyone can accept that as being a reasonable thing to do. And of course, the problem is that all the people that registered, oh, I'm all right. I'm registered. I can go and fly now. But no, you may be all right, but what about everybody else? For example, what about the people now who want to fly FPV but don't want to join a club or a national body? They are out of the pool. They can't. So I read it, you can't fly FPV unless you belong to one of those organisations. What about those people? You have sold them down the river, and their rights are every bit as important as your own. As I said, I'm fully behind national bodies and special interest groups, but I still believe that individuals should have the right to enjoy the freedoms that they've enjoyed in the past without killing anybody, without bringing down airliners. The risks are not there. The risk assessment has not been done. And why have the regulators not done a risk assessment? Well, it's pretty obvious, because if they did one, it would blow all their arguments out of the water, because we would all see just how low risk this hobby is. We've seen it 10 years FPV. Nobody has been killed. And 10 years of multi-rotor drones, nobody's been killed anywhere in the world, because it's that damn safe. It's that damn safe. Meanwhile, manned aviation, you know, what can I say? I'm blown away by the way, to be honest, some people have been very selfish, only cared about themselves. As long as I can fly on a Sunday afternoon down my club with my warbird, I'm happy. And what about the children of the future? They're just left out in the cold. Yeah, as I say, it's very hard not to be depressed, but I'm managing. I'm sticking with this. I'd like your feedback on this. Very important. Now, I've just spoken about the UK rules. I've got a video coming up on the American rules. Once the new remote ID rule drops, I will be doing a video on that, and we'll analyse what that means, if there's been any changes, but I don't expect there to be any changes, because believe it or not, just 1 in 20 registered drone flyers in the UK made a submission against that remote ID bill. 1 in 20. That's nothing. And if you compare it to the entire population of the US, which is over 300 million, only 56,000 submissions were made. So the FAA is going to say, this is not even a blip on the radar. It's such a small number. We don't care. We can just carry on doing exactly what we want to do. We can ignore all those people because they just don't figure in the greater scheme of things. So yeah, and I'll do a video for Australia because there's changes coming in there. But yeah, that's all I can do, is just try and keep people up to date with what's going on and solicit your feedback. We have lost the battle for the hobby. I really do believe we have, because we have missed the opportunity to say, no, your regulations are unacceptable. We will not comply, because you've already complied. You've already lost that opportunity. And so the regulators now know we can do whatever the hell we like, because these people don't kick back. They're not interested in their hobby. They're not interested in their hobby as such. They're interested in their own personal gratification. And as long as we provide a mechanism, however convoluted, however difficult for them to do that, we can change the rules, make them as harsh as we like, and eventually kick them all out of the airspace so that Google and Amazon and DHL can use it to make money. There we go. To my private parts with your comments, please. I'm sure there'll be a lot of comments supporting me, a lot of comments criticizing me. I'm happy. I want to get the discussion going, even if it's a little too late to save the day. And if I've got anything wrong, which is quite possible, go and correct me. Go down there and correct me. Tell me what I've got wrong. And yeah, there we go. So thank you for your time watching this video. Bit of a rant, bit of an update. And now I've got other things to do. I'll spot you later. Thanks to my Patreon supporters, you make all this possible. And I can see 2021, I'm going to be doing a lot of work battling ridiculous regulation on your behalf. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.